The Warriors of Chaos are an unrelenting horde of evil, bringing monsters and mutated worshippers from the Northern Wastes onto the armies of Order. With Game 3 Chaos Overhaul and new DLC combined with a massive CA rework, have they finally become worth the $8 price tag? I guess there's only one way to find out.
The dawning realization that we are not fallen. We are ascended.
The Chaos Warriors released on May 24th of 2016 alongside Warhammer 1, and while I had previously reviewed this DLC a few years ago, a lot has changed since. For most of my time in Warhammer 2, Chaos was a mediocre faction whose most enticing gameplay element was how strong their 3 lords were. In Warhammer 3, they got the full Beastman treatment, with one of the greatest race facelifts releasing with the Champions of Chaos DLC. While a deeper review for that is in the future, it brought sweeping updates to mechanics that were more than half a decade old. Gone are the days of hobo Archaon and camping to build a settlement on his back. Gone are the days of banking on turn 4 Chaos Warriors to roll the Empire. Gone are the days of raising a settlement and one of the AI's half-dozen armies resettles it over the end turn. The Warriors of Chaos have been shifted from a horde faction, requiring a really tricky combination of sacking, raising, and encamping, to a faction much closer to the Wood Elves with raised dead recruitment. They're generally a lot more aggressive than Wood Elves in both battle and campaign, but I'll get to the roster later. Instead of only raising or sacking settlements, they run around settling Chaos Altars, which can be made slightly more defensible, but are mostly for regional buffs to armies or soul collection. The only upgradable settlements are Dark Fortresses. These settlements are pretty standard provincial capitals, allowing for increases to the local recruitment pool as well as increasing hero capacity, even giving you a pretty decent economic foundation with each advanced military building massively boosting local region income. That's mainly to compensate for the fact that only these handful of settlements can make money, but a half dozen of them is more than enough to support a few Chaos Warrior stacks and still turn a 10k profit. They're mostly concentrated in the Northern Wastes, Norsca, and the Empire, but scattered liberally around the campaign map with the exception of Lustria and Ulthuan. Since Archaon and Co are the guys bringing the end times, most factions will outright declare war the second you're on their doorstep, which can sometimes filter in decent fights but would have previously ended in a few dozen resettled ruins. Even though you can upgrade a better garrison and Chaos Outpost, the real upgrade comes from Warhammer 3's new diplomacy, which can save you a massive headache losing a whole bunch of pretty poorly defended, freshly settled territory. See, nowadays you can settle Chaos Altars and trade them to your allies or even neutral factions in the same province or in some adjoining regions. This means Archaon can sell Prague, then sell everything else in Kislev off to a small pool of allies to build walls. Even if you'd rather go lore accurate and obliterate even the nearby Norskins, you can still forcefully vassalize them by taking their final settlement. One thing that hasn't changed is how worthless allies can be. CA said they updated the AI, but I swear these vassals are either deadweight the second they're needed or permanently limp in strength. There are a few options to avoid dragging their lifeless corpses around either through dilemmas or the Gifts of Chaos, but they're still pretty shit. The Gifts of Chaos Wheel can do a lot more than just benefit your vassals, offering massive faction-wide campaign buffs like more movement range or faction-wide battle buffs like lower spell cooldowns. The tech tree can unlock new gift slots, some of which allow for god-specific buffs like a Gift of Nurgle providing replenishment in foreign regions. These upgrades are perennial and require a pretty consistent flow of souls to upkeep. If you keep fighting massive battles, you should be more than able to keep up with the hundreds of souls per turn multiple of these gifts will cost you. However, souls can be used for a little bit more than gifts, as all non-legendary lords and heroes can be dedicated to a chaos god through their path of glory. It's expensive, but can make for a really entertaining time running themed armies or even the Crayon Eater armies with a little bit of everything. These paths of glory give unique mounts and skill trees, but can contribute to your lord's unique chaos favor, which is a kind of forgettable little stat that can give some buffs or debuffs to god-dedicated units. This can make for a kind of cluttered early game, constantly teetering on going into soul debt and balancing different chaos gifts. It's not too bad since the faction as a whole is pretty strong in battle and a new lord can raise an army within a turn. I've brought it up a few times, but instead of mustering or encamping, the Chaos Warriors recruit from a pool instead. Gone are the days of eating up your movement and camping to recruit a few Chaos Warriors, and instead of upgrading a Dark Fortress and waiting fighting for growth points to unlock Chosen, low-tier units like Marauders, Horsemen, Trolls, and Warhounds are found in every province. Higher-tier units can be recruited from this pool, but almost entirely only in provinces with dark fortresses or in areas with high chaos corruption. This on its own is missing a few parts, since how the hell are you going to conquer the world with Marauders, but it's actually by leveling up your units. Warband Upgrades is a new tab that offers almost the entire Chaos Warriors roster, but only if you're able to level your units high enough. Give Trolls 3 silver chevrons and they'll be upgraded to Armored Trolls. Get a Marauder up to rank 5 and they'll gain access to Chaos Warriors of every god. Bring those Chaos Warriors up to rank 6 and they'll turn into Chaos Knights, but take them one more chevron and they can become Undivided Chosen, given you research the required tech. This is a really fantastic gameplay style that encourages less reckless spellfest and encourages each of the units in your army to get some kills and level up. While it's a very neat idea, it's hampered by a few things. Firstly, unless you have the Champions of Chaos DLC, the Other Gods tab is completely barren, with only small selections being available. Secondly, it can be very difficult to get late-stage recruited lords up to fighting condition when all they have by turn 70 is some Marauders and Trolls. While I don't have a free fix for the former, the latter can be solved by using them as an orbital army, resacking settlements, or recruiting high-tier demons from the gifted pool. Things like Bloodthirsters and Toad Dragons should give any army a pretty stable punch no matter the stage of the campaign. Another brand new addition is that CA split up all 3 legendary lords into not only their own factions, but their own relatively unique campaigns. Archaon is a pretty straightforward shot to Kislev and the Empire. While he could expand eastward or westward to forcefully confederate either of the other lords, heading to Norska first is probably his best bet, since his campaign buff gives him increased research rate for each vassal he owns. I do want to give a warning though on avoiding vassalizing any Empire faction, as destroying them is the only way to achieve Archaon's long victory condition. Overall, Archaon is the most straightforward lord offered, but still pretty fun. Sadly, Kolek and Sigvald share the same long victory campaign, only requiring the standard 60 settlements and 13 unique chaos locations, but weirdly enough don't share Archaon's empire-bound trajectory and instead prefer to go their separate ways, with Sigvald marching westward toward Nagarond and Kolek eastward toward Cathay. Kolek is an undivided lord mainly buffing Dragon Ogres and Shaggoths, with dark fortresses owned by his faction allowing for increased Dragon Ogre capacity, with Kolek's army making Dragon Ogres cheaper and giving them missile resistance. His campaign is a little bit harder since his size in the black powder ridden Cathay makes him a walking crane gunner target, and his trajectory steering him away from the majority of dark fortresses. All that being said, his campaign can feel a little dull since there isn't that much done with the fact that he's the Dragon Ogre guy, but he makes up for it in battle. A similar thing could be said about Sigvald, who is a Slaanesh favored lord. His mechanics are very similar to both Kolek and Archaon, but his entire faction gains access to some of the Slaanesh army abilities. Things like seducing enemy units, giving defeated enemy lords STDs, and some Slaanesh army abilities. Sigvald is an incredible duelist and can bump his infantry up a peg, but most Chaos infantry was already pretty decent. I guess now's a good time to touch on their roster. Previously, all armies were entirely Chaos Warriors, Chosen, and Shaggoths, but with the new recruiting method, there's actually a reason to recruit varied armies. Like I said before, without the Champions of Chaos DLC, the god-specific Warband upgrades can be a little barren, so you don't have quite as many flavors of Chosen, but still a pretty solid selection. The Warriors of Chaos play a very heavy melee style, with most melee infantry besides Marauders being incredibly slow but ridiculously tanky, with high armor stats and insane melee defense. There's rarely ever a melee fight they're not winning, especially when you upgrade to Chosen or Aspiring Champions, but they still have some flaws. Unsurprisingly, they're vulnerable to armor-piercing missiles, and while you do have units like Warhounds to run down skirmishers, everything including your melee cavalry and chariots kind of get bullied by skirmishers. There's a few times where these weird moments in battle crop up where the infantry or even cavalry has decisively won the brawl but are still getting outrider back shots, or better yet being shot by routing pistoliers. Basically, make sure you have pocket warhounds to catch them out, or spells to slow them down. Chaos of course gets some terror-causing monsters like giants, trolls, and spawn, but they share a lot of the same positives as the infantry, with the added caveat of horrible leadership, with the exception of spawn. The real prize monsters are Dragon Ogres and Shaggoths. Sadly, you can no longer run a 19 Shaggoth Doom stack, but even with a max limit of 6, they'll still dumpster large targets, infantry blobs, and even duelist lords. The roster as a whole is incredibly cohesive, with a few variants of chariots and cavalry to play some classic hammer and anvil with enough monsters and beefy melee units to decisively win a brawl, with your only threats being skirmishers and armor-piercing ranged. Luckily though, a lot of the units play really well into the new XP focus system, with units that can be upgraded like infantry and cavalry taking the majority of kills, and fear or terror causing monsters like manticores and warhounds playing a supportive role. Each of the lords in battle are still brick shithouses. Archaon is an almost unchallengeable duelist caster hybrid, with Sigvald being an equally amazing duelist and incredibly quick on foot. Kolic though, he just breaks shit. Overall, I have to say this campaign had an amazing turnaround. I vividly remember dealing with the chaos roundabout of hell, bouncing around to Vrest for a dozen turns making sure that none of my territory got resettled. With the brand new mechanics, massively expanded roster giving you access to demons, a new system that actively encourages a mixed army, and the ability to give all of your bad settlements to allies, I can finally say that you really do feel like an unimpeded force bringing upon the end times. While I do think Kolic specifically fumbles a lot with his lack of more meaningful mechanics, it's really hard to complain with a full race only costing $8 and providing 3 pretty enjoyable campaigns. After having to deal with the shit show this faction was for the entirety of Warhammer 2, I'm pretty damn happy seeing how fun CA were able to make this faction, and now can full-heartedly recommend it. I'll still always recommend waiting for a sale, but the next DLC is a re-review for the Grim and the Grave. I'll see you then.